penetrating darkness, rising from the soil and contaminate the air. Close the world in planetary darkness. The chill rises from the soil. Every time is something new, light, new, meaning.
Anyway, the topic was agency or not for humans, and maybe continue on the subject of consciousness that we touched last week, and anthropocentric view of the world. So maybe who wants to start?
I'll just put a little thing out there and see if anyone's interested in it, which is that I think we come across this question of human agency out of the fact that human beings feel separate from the world in which they live, and separate from each other. There's a disconnect. There's nature in one place and human beings in another place, for instance. And agency, I guess you could argue that in a way, agency also implies will and power to manipulate circumstances. You get these questions, do human beings have free will, which is closely related, I guess, to the question of what degree of agency do we have. I wonder whether instead of actually talking about whether we have agency, we're better examining what would we say, because we're talking from a point of disconnection. What would we say if we felt a genuine connection with the natural world and the environment in which we live? Because my observation in saying this is that I feel as though if we re-established our connection, we wouldn't feel the need to ask the question about agency in the first place. It just wouldn't arise, because what we wanted would be one and the same thing with what everything else wanted. there wouldn't be, you would sort of be moving with the river rather than standing on the bank on one side of it trying to manage it and get it to obey your instructions and go where you want it to go. You're actually part of the way it's going. And if you're part of everything.
Going back to the alien cortex again, because we're always going back to the disconnect. And before we start on that, I just wanted to thank DB very much for posting the thing on the talk on William Blake, the comments on his poetry, because that is exactly what we're talking about, isn't it? Because it was really, really very well made on the sub there. I don't know if any other ones, but it talks about this too. But yes, Gary, yes, it would be nice to explore it as if we felt a connection. But lots of us in this group, I mean, it would be nice to hear how do we feel in this connection? How, for example, for me, when I got aware of what was happening at a very young age in the world, it was not something I could put in words. It was something that I felt in my body, as if I was being hurt when I was seeing at a very young age a lot of lights everywhere and going up in the countryside, and also I could feel the rivers sick and animals going away. I mean, that is just I'm just bringing out sensations more than, and it evolved into other things when my intellectual education was made, and I started to understand the connections with human activities. But that's how, I mean, for me, from a point of view as a woman and also a child that I was, it was a pain. It was something very, very painful.
So you're saying you're feeling the pain of the natural world being endangered, is that what you mean?
Yeah, it's like you feel a disease that's getting at you, and you feel even the death. You feel like you're losing every day somebody of your family.
Yeah. I used to feel that back in the bygone days, when I used to listen to Sam Mitchell give his talks. I think every Friday he reserved his Friday talk for a reading from a website called Monga Bay. And Monga Bay is basically a litany of outrages against the natural environment. You know, how many elephants were killed for their tusks this week, and how many million acres of the Amazon were burnt during the week. And you've just reminded me of that, because I actually couldn't listen to that talk that he gave on Fridays, because the pain of listening to it, of the description of what was happening, was just too much. It wasn't a case of hiding my head in the sand, and pretending that it's not going on. It was simply a case of just having to listen to somebody describe what was happening. It was just altogether too much. I remember distinctly there was one episode, I think that was probably the one that completely finished me off forever, and I never went back, was where, I don't know where it was, somewhere in Southeast Asia, I'm not sure, where they tried to get rid of feral pigs, possibly these damaged crops, I don't know what they did, by putting bait which has got explosives in it. Except that what was happening was the elephants were eating the bait, the explosive bait, and getting their mouths blown out. And, I mean, it's a bit hard to take, I know, I suppose it's an extreme point, but I'm just doing it to sort of illustrate what happens when you start to tune into the pain of the natural world. If you do feel some connection to it and you're exposed to that kind of thing, it's very difficult to cope with. DB, did you want to say something about the Blake? Because I didn't. I haven't followed up anything on Reddit the last few days. Is there anything you feel that you can say about what was posted there? Oh, okay, you can't talk. Fair enough. Yep, okay, that's all right. Anybody else follow up the Blake?
Yes, or else anybody else who could share a little bit what they mean by if they can how do we feel when we look at the world from the point of view of our connection in the subject of human agency, because for me it's very difficult to see this clearly. I really like to have some kind of, because it's again a thing that's very to do with the senses and not language, for me personally, but maybe some other people here have another take on this.
Yeah, I guess I can give it a try. But I first wanted to respond to what Gary was saying about the Mongo Bay, the summit.
Monga Bay, Monga Bay.
Yeah. Because I listened to Sam read those for many years, coming up to a decade almost now, and I think it has a purpose, because to me it's a little different from what you just described, because I could never be bothered to read those things every week or even every month. But having it on your headphones, like when you go for a walk or something, with a weekly summary like he makes for your ears, that is totally possible for me to take in. But like you said, I could never bring myself to sit and read it, if you understand what I'm saying. Because if I read it, then I'm only doing that. But if I'm going for a walk along the beach and listening to it, then I can, I can choose. I can listen to it, but I can shut it out if I want, or I can kind of laugh within myself to the Sam Mitchell's commentary to it. You have all kinds of ways that you can put some kind of distance between yourself and the stuff. But I think my most important point about those Monga Bay weekly podcasts from Sam is that they keep you informed, sort of, no matter what you may imagine in your own life or in your feelings, and what you sort of feel that you need to say to yourself, to tell yourself in order to carry on. This Monga Bay roundup kind of, puts everything in place again and tells you that yes, Indonesia is fucked, south of Saharan Africa is fucked, the Americas are fucked, Europe is fucked, the Arctic is fucked, and the Antarctica is also fucked. He doesn't say it like that, but that's kind of the conclusions that you will have to draw after listening to 50 Monga Bay weekly roundups in a year. So I think that is kind of good, because politicians and IPCC reports and meetings and stuff, they sort of always try to give this upbeat, we are finally getting control over of the destruction and the climate problem. Everything is within reach. That's kind of the PR message. So I think Manga Bay is a very good counter message to that, and it's also very well sourced and researched and stuff. Yeah. So I totally get the emotional wish to just shut it out. I'm probably a bit more hardcore than you, Gary. So I've been around for this kind of stuff for more decades, so I can take it. But I would never read it because reading is just too much. Too much just doing this thing for half an hour or something. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a couple of things. Yeah. I mean, sure. I mean, definitely, I'm affected. This on and on and on and on. All this nature destruction porn, and well, basically, it isn't having any effect. It's not really going to, not in the way it would need to. If it was going to, it would have by now. And then the next, I guess, the next thought is, well, what does it take to cause human beings to alter their course? And because it needs to be a collective action, is it possible at all? I mean, it looks at this stage as so it's not. There's no sign. And in any event, as people in who are informed will tell you, of course, it's probably 50 years too late. But yeah, sure, it's an important. Go on, sorry.
Yeah, but I think it's important, and I will keep fighting for for it being important, because as we've been discussing now for many weeks on this show, you have we're coming up to some kind of society shutdown. For lack of food and water and stuff in quite a few, not so many years from now, and various different groups who care about ecology and stuff have kind of got the knife through their throat about should they go on an all-out revolution or death fight for nature now, or should they just stand by and watch society collapse in order for the rest of the living planet to sort of bounce back after the collapse. And I think a quite rational conclusion after listening to many years of Manga Bay weekly roundups is that nope, humans are not going to ever stop destroying forests and oceans and animal populations and stuff. This is just who we are. So as long as we have this extra energy that we get from not only eating but also extracting energy. I think somebody made the point over the last week that all the other animals and plants, they just get energy from what they eat. But we humans, we are not satisfied with just eating and getting energy. We want to have like 80 times that energy that we eat. We want to transport us and heat our houses and move us about and stuff. So this is just who we are as a species. This is what civilized society does. It does destroy all of these things, and the only way that destruction can stop is if the industrial society stops. That's pretty clear from Sam Mitchell's reading of Manga Bay anyway, the way I see it. So that is the point of doing something like that. I will always say that finding the truth and telling the truth is important. You may not understand yourself. If you're the one spreading the truth, you may not understand yourself why it's important, or who the fuck is going to ever use that truth for anything good. But somebody on the planet out of 8 billion people will find a way to use the truth for some kind of good, I think.
But when
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I had a question.
I had quite a bit to say, Sophie. Do you want to get your bit in first?
Obviously, if you have a bit to say, I'll just very shortly, and we can keep that question for later on. Because when I listen to Going South, and I totally agree with what he's saying on the civilization and us humans with our need. But the question is it because we have lost? It comes back to the same thing. It's because we have lost our connection with our ecosystem, with our world around us, that we have come to civilization. So we're back again at the same thing. We're saying it's civilization, that's the industrial civilization, that's the culprit, but behind it, it's our disconnection again. We come back to not a spiritual, more than a disconnect, a break, that Lord Hugh called the alien cortex. And so we're always going back to the same thing. That's.
Can I just address Torstein and then come back to you, Sophie? Which is what Torstein was just saying about energy is very interesting, because what is left out of all the current discourses about any kind of energy, we're going to save everything, ourselves and the planet and everything else, by having renewable energy or free energy or sustainable energy or any kind of energy that's not fossil fuel energy, whatever you like, pick whichever one you want, completely ignores the main issue, which Torstein really touched upon, which is energy is this great lever which we have over everything else. It multiplies everything we do. It multiplies the effect of it so hugely. That the energy that we can expend each human being can expend is always much more than that human being's personal individual energy. And so we have an energy problem at a very basic level of just simply the fact that we're using it, regardless of how it is using external energy. I mean, regardless of how it's obtained and whether or not that is harmful in itself as a separate issue, almost doesn't matter in a way. I wanted to make a remark about, what you said about activists waiting for collapse, and the damaging thing is industrial civilization, and also thinking of Sam in his he had a discussion once with Derek Jensen, and I think they more or less came to the conclusion in their discussion that of course that the global industrial civilization is the elephant in the room. And then I think Sam put up the objection and said, look, he said, yeah, sure, okay, so you shut down the means of industrial agriculture and all the rest of it. Well, the first thing that people are going to do is just go rampaging across the natural environment and completely wipe it clean in desperation to get food directly from the natural environment during that bottleneck period between the end of industrial support and the beginning of everybody, of course, dying out, and that so there would be this kind of last minute decimation of the natural world, because everybody would suddenly go out and hunt, and the natural world is already natural reserves of food source are going to be very rapidly depleted. And I remember that particular talk because afterwards, Derek got back to Sam and said, "Hey, can we do another talk for another 15 minutes or something? Because I want to answer that question in detail." And Derek's thing was that, well, no, he said we probably won't cause as much damage to the natural environment in our dying moments as you might think, because we won't have the energy to get to a lot of the places. He sort of gave the example of like, we're not going to be able to go trawler fishing in the middle of the Pacific Ocean because we simply won't have a boat, we won't have the fuel for a boat to get there. So there'll be lots of natural reserves of the natural environment which will survive. But it was still an interesting point to bear in mind that, whilst the natural world may, in the long term, it'll end up being better without.
Of agriculture and industrial life. So yeah, and now also it's not like some politicians is presenting a choice. Do you want to take the collapse road or the lasting civilization road? Collapse doesn't work like that. Society just collapses. So it's not like you have to weigh. Yeah, but what if people go out and hunt and cut forests and stuff? Maybe we should cancel your collapse plan. That's not the discussion we're having, is it?
Oh no, I don't think it was being used in the sense that we should therefore not either encourage collapse or try to present it happening. It was simply just running through the scenario of once collapse starts or goes ahead, it might not look as good, at least initially, as people would like it to in terms of the regeneration of the natural environment. I think, as you say, the time scale, sure, once we're gone or once we're cut down to a reasonable size, the natural world is going to have a lot of time on it to rebuild. I think, sure, kind of depends, though, things that have become extinct, looking at an extremely long life, extremely long time span before, you start recovering diversity once you've got important species that just aren't here anymore. Did you want to say something, Torstein? Otherwise, I just want to go back and address Sophie.
Yeah. I think maybe the most important. Let's say that you do get a week or a month or something with a very hard attack on the remaining nature. What you will do during that month will be to decimate the numbers of the different species. The numbers of trees and the numbers of deer or elk or moose or whatever. What you won't do is totally eradicate species within a month just by going, as you say, commando without a car, without a trawler or anything. So just the sort of scaling down of population numbers during that crazy month won't be that serious, because that will just bounce back within a year or two, like populations do, like mice and birds that hunt mice and stuff. They bounce back in a very short time. So I don't think that is such a big concern.
Well, it all depends on the season it happens and the environment where you are too. Like
Yeah.
urban or not, if it happens in the winter or if it happens in the summer, if there is growth, it's where you are geographically. Are you in a mountain? Are you near the sea? We can't make a general statement about the impact that we would have around us if we went hungry and had to go on a rampage. We're not locusts. I was posting there. Well, I just wrote there that during the Irish famine, when the potatoes disappeared, people were already weakened by difficult lives and poverty, so they couldn't go anywhere to find stuff. They didn't. They were they just died like that because they died of weakness, disease, and but they had food if they could have got to it. There was other routes, and there was also a lot of people who had forgotten about what they could use foraging because they were enslaved for too long and their culture had been destroyed. The people near the shore, they knew about the shells and the seaweed and the islands. Some of them survived because of that, but a lot of people didn't know about it and couldn't get there because they were too weak. So that's what happens, you know.
Yeah, that's a very key point about energy also, because I can't really say I have first-hand experience, but almost first-hand. Because sometimes when you go trout fishing in the mountains, because your fridge is empty, you don't have anything to eat in your fridge, and there's not coming anything there for a while, for a week or so, and then your hunger can sort of be a force when you go to the river to catch trout, because it's like you have to catch. And I even told the river and told the trout that I have to kill you because I need your proteins or whatever. But you don't have to go very many days without any food before you have an acute energy problem where you can't get any new food because you haven't eaten in a week. So I think that's a big buffer for post-civilized humans. That if you really get down to having gone a week without any food and maybe not even clean water, then you have really low energy levels for creatively hunting or creatively catching anything animal food anyway. Plants are of course easier, and you can if you know about 10-20 different species that live in a forest area, you can just go for those and just go around grazing or eating these leaves or clovers or whatever all day.
I wanted to go back to just address something Sophie said a few minutes ago about the destructive power of civilization. This is a kind of a system that we've set up, which at other times we've called the machine and Moloch and all this kind of thing in these discussions. And during the week, both Sophie and I were listening to a couple of very interesting discussions between Brett Weinstein and Freddie Sayers in one of them, and Brett Weinstein and Neil Oliver in the other discussion. One of the things that was brought up there, I think brought up in the discussion by Weinstein, was because he's an evolutionary biologist, and he didn't actually expand on this point to any great extent, unfortunately. But what he did say was he looked at the systems that we set up. I think he was talking in this case specifically about the way Big Pharma operates in terms of having become a sort of self self-sustaining, self-serving, self-promoting organism in its own right. That the corporate system that they have is now really an organism, and it evolves in. He can see that as an evolutionary biologist, he could see that it was evolving and operating in ways that you would expect an organic organism to do. Um, and what he was, I think, what he was pointing out is it then has an agenda of its own once you've set up these large-scale systems. And the agenda of these systems is then, even though human beings have caused it to come into existence, they no longer control it, that it has a life of its own. And not only that, but human beings are not always clear on what the agenda of this system is and where it's likely to take them. And I think I was just thinking about those points when Sophie was talking about, industrial civilization. Is that is what we've done? This is the mega system. All of the smaller systems within it might be corporate. And I guess this links back to where we started off at the beginning about this question of human agency. Is that now that human agency has created these things, these entities, they now are the ones that have agency, but it's not under our control. And so this question of agency, and I think as part of the question of agency, I think also to me, I get this lingering feeling of guilt associated with it. Is oh, what's wrong with us? Why don't we do anything? We're such horrible beings, why can't we do the right thing? Why are we so reprehensible and behave so badly? And yeah, sure. I mean, that's certainly true in many ways, but there seems to be more to the story because within this collective of apparently horrible beings, there's a lot of really well-meaning ones, such as the people on Monga Bay, for instance. But also our agency is, even if we had it, how good is it going to be now in the face of these sort of mega organisms that we've created, which are like our Frankensteins, that we've created these things and breathed life into them, and then they're going off by themselves. So they're just some thoughts that I just had as a result of what Sophie said. I don't know if any... Go on.
I don't agree with that at all. That's like too easy to just blame the system that we're living in. It's like Lord Yu used to say that he went through collapse already because South Africa, the system he grew up in South Africa, collapsed during his lifetime, and that system was called apartheid. And especially the Swedes and the Scandinavians led the boycotts of the apartheid regime in South Africa. And what we're going through now is kind of the same system collapse, because we have decided that the best species in the universe is human beings. And all the other plants and animals are have less worth than us, and so we will get a really hard reality check when our system collapses and we go down in the mud with the rest of the species, and we discover that we're not we're not very different. We're just some blubber lying here in the mud with the rest of them. So you're kind of blaming if we accept the parallel to apartheid to civilized society, you're kind of blaming apartheid and saying that we us white folks in South Africa, we can't do anything. It's the apartheid. The apartheid is running things now. It's not us people doing it. So I find that irresponsible in a way, and also it's the part of agency that we really have been discussing for for a few weeks is the debate that is on all the climate Twitters and all the climate discussions all over the planet. Whether or not we can actually do anything to stop climate collapsing the civilized society. And everybody who has a paycheck in climate science say that we certainly do have agency, and everybody who used to get a paycheck or is just an activist, citizen activist, say that no, this ship sailed 50 years ago. And so we don't have agency. So that's kind of where the discussion stands. And I think the point that Bob made last week on this call was to say that if we don't have agency, and our parents' generation didn't have agency because we were already past the tipping point back when they were kids, our parents' generation were kids, then it's not rational to go around with a lot of guilt, because what should we do? We couldn't do anything 30 years before we were born. That's not physically possible. So yeah, we can take on sort of a species level guilt, or we can also figure out that it was this kind of civilized life that ruined everything. But that also wasn't our invention, you and me. Me and Gary didn't invent a human civilization or industry. And to Sophie, I think you said something about going back to the split and to the alien cortex and the start of that. That is also almost a synonym for civilization, because civilization means city life, right? And the whole point of an early city was to have a wall between where people lived and there you had nature, right? So in a sense, the alien cortex is kind of that idea of living apart from nature. There you have the word apart, so you have apartheid again. So the whole thing is kind of sociopathic and deeply racist with apartheid and keeping things separate, keeping the god species for itself and nature outside of the walls.
I really appreciate your answer there to everything. There's one thing though, I don't think when I was listening to Gary, there was an idea of blame on the machine, because I don't think you just dismiss human agency and say, oh, it's our creation, it's gone, But what I think what Gary was saying is that machine, and that's what DB is writing on the comments that he, after William Blake, that the video on William Blake that was posted on subreddit, is that this kind of monster, alien cortex, Urizen, whatever it is, and it is at the core of this monster that's ruling our world at the moment, is that its characteristic is that it's self-destructive and it's turning on itself. And our agency in there is not say, well, we can't blame and say it's fault, we're humans, poor humans, we've done it, and now our creation is killing us. It's not that. It's just that we're witnessing a thing that's eating its tail, and that is it's bringing us to our demise. I don't know where our agency stands there, except at a level of at a spiritual level and at an acceptance level and at a catharsis level, but at a grieving level. But other than that, I don't see any other position we can have.
But the discussion last week was about, why is Europe doing this, and the European Union is running itself into the ground, and they're collapsing their own economy. And then you were going on about this is kind of a self-regulating machine and blah blah blah. And I tried to point out that there is a country called the United States of America, which is at the head of the NATO alliance, which is not really an alliance. It's one leading nation and 30 slaves who are just told what to do. So instead of kind of talking about having a runaway society that does what it as an entity wants, I think we should remember that we have a US empire in this world, and it has like something like 400 military bases all over the planet, and let's not just give them a free card to do whatever they want. Let's call it by the real name, USA. Okay, I'm not condemning USA or anything. I'm just saying they are pulling the string every fucking day. So let's not fool ourselves and say that this is a techno-utopian entity that is run amok. It's USA. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably become a bit circular, I think, in the USA, where the voices that we hear and what their media pumps out is very much also the creation of the sort of mega machine that they've set up. The voices. This is going back. Again, I'm reminded of the Weinstein discussion where he talked about one of his major complaints. He was basically, his discussion was about the coronavirus thing, but it's applicable here, I think. One of his major complaints was that all of our institutions had become completely captured by a sort of allowable narrative, which is fairly narrow, and which basically is the same general thing as you find the large corporate viewpoint, or the sort of empire narratives that attitude that places like the United States have. And so, of course, any voices that come out of that are basically not really independent human voices with any particular influence of their own. They're just they're just mouthing the script of the machine, kind of thing. I just wanted to go back just where you said that I was blaming the system, and I'm not trying to shift blame, and it's why I brought up this question of a feeling of guilt, because I think the existence of a feeling of a certain guilt as a human being is, to some degree I'm contributing to this. I may not have knowingly done it. I may not be able to even avoid continuing to do it. But to some extent, everybody is either deliberately or not deliberately contributing to this, and so there's if you're honest with yourself, I suppose there is a bit of a feeling of culpability there. I mean, just personally, I'm not trying to shift any of my personal feelings onto some separate faceless entity, you know. But I can see your point there. You know, I mean, it's obviously not constructive to just say, oh well, it's got nothing to do with us. It's all this mega machine thing. You know, completely out of my hands. I'm okay. I'm lily white, and you know, some other force is going to have to act. And you know, as Sophie said, and of course, as we said last week, you know, maybe that other force is acting too, in terms of the whole the whole industrial thing, civilization having become so insanely overdeveloped. You know, it's like one of these extreme muscle building people who have got their bodies into such a condition that they can't even bend over or move. That, you know, because that they've taken their pursuit to such a ridiculous extreme. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that for a minute.
Yes, thanks, Gary. So this carrying of guilt is not productive in any way, and it stops you from being active. It's actually against. I don't know. It brings back again the question of agency. Yeah, I don't think the species guilt is lead. It's a. I think it leads you to a cul-de-sac. It leads you to a trap. As Going South was saying, like we were only we were born into something that was already happening. We have absolutely no take in what has happened. So it's an interesting intellectual and discussion thing to do to put point of view, but you don't want to go in that direction. Otherwise, you end up in this suicidal kind of, you know, cynical. You know, we're nothing, human beings are a parasite. I mean, all this sort of views, and actually that's where I'd like to go back to, because we're going to be talking to George, who's saying that saying like human beings are the only species that have absolutely no ecological role. We touched that in our last meeting when we talked about human consciousness, and are we just here to be witnesses to this beautiful world? And I'd like to just maybe go back there if anybody has something to say on this.
Well, I suppose just to begin it, you know, if he's asserting that we have no ecological role, then I suppose it's implied in what he's saying that nature has made a mistake and that we shouldn't have been here. And I don't know, does that just spark anything in you? To you know, has nature made a mistake? Are we in error? Should in fact we have died out or not been here, like some kind of genetic modification that turned out a strange creature that didn't have a mouth and couldn't live? You know, I mean, are we in that category or not?
Who are we to say that nature can make a mistake? Like, we are part of nature, so it's just, yeah, exactly. Like, I don't understand even the word mistake in the context of the natural world. There is no mistakes. There can't be a mistake.
Well, that's what I would have said. What I would have preferred to have said was that George is implying that God is fallible, but I didn't want to put it in those quite that way. You know, because it just sounds a bit grandiose to say that God doesn't make mistakes. But you know, given that we are here and it probably isn't a mistake, I suppose the next thing is, well, it was the supposedly evolutionary process that led to the formation of our strange psychology. is that also natural? You know, and even the concrete and glass world, which even human beings call not the natural world. I don't know. I mean, is it just too extreme to say that like, even if it is unnatural, if we went back and reran the experiment, there's probably a good chance that we repeat it and end up back here where we are. So a kind of a natural progression would occur anyway. So I suppose we're looking at the question of where do we draw the line between what's natural and what's not, or is everything natural, including us and all our amazing dysfunctional creations? I don't know. Do we want to stop with that question? You got a thought about that?
I think the way I see it, when we came to the city wall and the civilized life within the town or village or whatever, then started a new kind of cultural evolution in humans, where the traits that we now know and hate were promoted by city life, like, you know, being sneaky, or, you know, being a criminal, or being a tyrant, and, you know, being a good soldier and killing a lot of people. So I think maybe what we are referring to as the alien cortex is something that was quite small eventually, in the beginning, but then eventually became a huge part of what humanity is today, or what humans are today, because now we kind of thinking in a civilized system sense, and we talk about, you know, how can me or my group get ahead in this rat race, and, you know. So what do you think about that as
because, you know, how Lord Hugh spoke about transhumanism, and he covered that in different ways, not just in terms of you know, bionic arms and neural implants, but also in terms of people getting transgender modifications and all that. But the thought that just struck me while you were talking was that the alien cortex could have been our first transhuman creation. You know, almost unwittingly, we created this sort of phantom self within ourselves that isn't really, you could argue, is not really human, because of, well, it seems to be hostile to our best interests in a lot of ways. And so, you know, with the cultural, the movement, as you were saying, into gradually, you know, more civilized environment, civilized, I don't mean civilized, you know, civilization environment, that led to fortuitous circumstances for an invasive species to take over. You know, the suddenly an alien cortex could take root in the vegetable patch and begin to smother everything. Yeah, so it's sorry, I sort of, I suppose I'm not really commenting directly on what you said, but it just occurred to me that the alien cortex might be our sort of transhuman creation, that we have to note what we've done there within ourselves. You know,
I don't really subscribe to that completely, what you say about the transhumanist creation. I think we can't go back. We had this little piece of brain that differentiates from our cousins, apes, and it's a gift of nature. It didn't come from, you know, from I mean, it was not a monstrous creation. It came from nature. I think it's the way we used it that operated the horrors. It was the lack of mastering it, and it became the ruler of our behaviors and our ways of thinking. But when we used it wisely, and when we discovered fire, and we thought that we could, shape a few stones to scrape skins to keep us warm, because we hadn't as many hair as the animals around us, and we were ingenious in certain ways, but I don't know if we were wise already, or if we'd already started to let the alien cortex run amok. But I think it's a
Recording is on.
so it's back again on this question of mastering of this alien cortex, of not letting it rule us, but the awareness. Is that human agency? Is that really at the root of human agency? Just throwing this out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I'm just a little bit wary of the word mastery, because I think that throws us back in with the original problem, is that there's some entity which is controlling something else, which is, that's the characteristic of the alien cortex, is the control narrative, dominance narrative projected in itself and all sorts of ways. But I think, looking at this more from the point of view as it being a misused tool seems more constructive. I mean, as you referred to it as that, and it's and certainly, as you can see, also that's writ very large in society, where we have a lot of amazing things that we've managed to create, and they're generally being used incorrectly or excessively. There's a substantial part of the mess that we're in at the moment, is the misuse of tools, not just internal ones, but external ones.
Yeah, if you look at monkeys, you see, and certain species, but mostly monkeys. But I've seen that in the octopus too. They use objects in the environment as tools, and they have a certain technique that hasn't so far run amok, that has just kept going, and we seem to, like for energy, like the Jevons paradox, we seem to, once we found something, well, then we found a more energy efficient way of using it, of doing it. So it's that I think that's the avenue that we follow.
Yeah. I'm just wondering where to take this subject now. See,
we were in the thing that I don't honestly, I don't like the terrain where we say that we are guilty. I don't like this because it's unproductive, and I don't like the idea. It doesn't ring with me that we are a parasite species that shouldn't have never existed, and that we have no role. And that's where we started this, and that is that is a bit what we were talking about last week.
But another. We might be able to head off in a new direction, because what I'm just thinking of now is thinking of the discussions about terror management theory, and the also the grieving processes, in particular the pleading and denial phase, where and I'm wondering if we're in that at the moment, where we can see the direction in which the civilization and the planet that we're clinging desperately to is not going to be supporting us very much longer. And even here, we're trying to have a discussion that is, a little bit above the ordinary. That we're still, in a way, scratching around desperately for some way of looking at this that will create a sense of resolution within ourselves. And I'm not so sure that we're going to find that. I mean, of course, this is not to set aside this strictly spiritual way of looking at it. Is sense of transcending the this sort of ego-centered way of looking at things. But I think it's true to say of most people that they haven't reached that exalted stage. So is a lot of this discussion end up being in the realm of trying to come to a position of understanding about this instead of constantly squirming around. Sorry, I'd like to be able to develop that a little bit more clearly. I'm not sure that I can. Does anyone else want to comment?
Yeah, I think back to Manga Bay and they're kind of piled on reporting about what we are doing to this planet. I think acceptance of that is possible, at least for some of us. But that doesn't, that grows our understanding of the situation, but it doesn't necessarily add to the guilt of us as individuals. It's more like learning about the apartheid system, right? So we can accept that apartheid is a bad system, and now I'm talking about the human apartheid species system thing, or the civilized form of human systems. So understanding that system is unnatural and ecological, I think is important, and kind of the challenge for everyone prey and being happy with that. So we have this huge prehistory of being like the other animals and fitting in much better than we do now, and that in many ways that is also our future. So if we can embrace sort of the natural side of being human, like most of the things, the good things in life are free is an expression, and most of the good things that we appreciate are also natural and pre-civilized, like food and sex and sleep and community and being happy with together with other people. I think Sophie used the word last time about communion or something, or being together and having a meal and talking with friends and family. Those are kind of pre-civilized pleasures also. So I think we can easily put the blame and the guilt on the 10,000 year civilized system, which was hostile to nature in many ways. Many small ways in the beginning, but like my comparison a month ago or something to a primitive kind of flying machine that somebody was testing off a cliff, he could feel that, okay, this is a big success, for 10 minutes until it crashed to the ground. Then we have this agricultural society that we've been in for 10,000 years now. And it was also crashing to the ground because it was unsustainable. But as these things go, some things that are unsustainable and can't continue, they still take 10,000 years to play out before they crash to the ground. That doesn't mean it was ever sustainable during those 10,000 years. It just takes a long time to destroy an entire planet.
Yeah. I think too we're at a bit of a disadvantage at this end of history by having this sort of hyper awareness of our predicament. I think if you go back in time, and obviously, there's even in tribal situations or hunter-gatherer situations, groups would have been wiped out for various reasons, disease or some unexpected thing might have occurred. But now we've got all of this technological assistance to help us understand what the predicament is that we're in, but also as individuals, we've, as part, I think, of the alien cortex package, we've got this sort of hyper-vigilant mentality that acutely tunes us in to the situation that we're in. And so it magnifies it. I don't think it needs magnifying. It could hardly be any worse. But I mean, it is a very large thing to be facing. And so, of course, I think we're still not at a point of acceptance with it. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be trying to do the right thing, but at the same time, I think that people are still squirming around, not in acceptance of this. I think this goes back a bit to what Lord here was saying about his sense of ataraxia, that we're going to go down, but it's a case of the kind of quality of your psychology as that happens. Are you going to go down screaming resistance the whole way, or understanding the nature of what's occurring?
What you're saying, Gary, puts me in resonance with probably what was happening a long time ago when let's say a group of early humans were in a place where they had been for a long time, that they hadn't moved because for any reasons, and their area was starting to be devoid of prey and things to forage, and it was starting to get dirty by their own excrements and stuff like that. So they probably had to move on to another area where they would maybe survive, maybe not. And, it's not very difficult to imagine that. I don't think that is far-reaching. I think it probably did happen and still happening all the time in hunter-gatherers. And you see, when you talk about acceptance, these people also knew when it was time to say, well, we can't go any further. Death is there, and we accept death, and maybe a few are going to go to survive, and the ones that will stay will die. I mean, there is this constantly at the core of animal insect colonies too. There's a moment where you can't go anywhere, and whether it's and things collapse because there is no energy, no food, and the animal world doesn't ask himself all the questions on ataraxia and stuff like that. It just happens. It is. It's just what is. When the human beings, how do we know when they started to deny this outcome of our life, which is death, and tried to not let things happen? So that's where we come to overshoot. I think that's when we come to, at all cost we have to grow, and we have to create cities, and we have to make those big fields, even if we're destroying everything around, and then we'll find fertilizers, so we'll produce more, and then we'll have a surplus. But we're also touching again the denial of death, and far away from the acceptance. And in this time of collapse, I feel like we're a little bit like these insects who are running around knowing that they're going to just go, and they're going mental, but then suddenly they stop, and they see that it's what is. But we're not. We're clinging on to our reasoning alien cortex or whatever, in form of intellect and despair and denial of death in the throes of what is happening. But that's what is happening to our species. We didn't see, and without any guilt in that, it's just what happened. We didn't see the time when we had to let go.
Yeah, I think you're making a great point, Sophie, about the big game ending or being depleted just before human settlements or human agriculture happened. So that is a part of prehistory that is being studied more and more now. And I think to a degree you could say that everything from finding out how to keep a fire and start a fire to sharpening those rocks to use for scraping the skins and also to use for arrowheads and stuff. All of those kinds of technological interventions, they were sort of a very slow start to the eco collapse that happened after agriculture started. So it's a very, very slow start, almost like the start of the melting of the Greenland ice sheet. It doesn't go very fast in the beginning. But then, it really comes down hard. So, yeah, I think it's important to remember that overshoot started before agriculture, in a sense, because we hunted all the big animals to extinction. And burning the forests and, all of these horrors.
Yeah. No, I was just going to make the point about just Torsten was talking about the killing off all the megafauna, and this goes back, because a lot of people say, oh, these early hunter-gatherer societies and how wonderfully in tune with nature and all the rest of it they were, and but I think you could argue that a lot of them went through a stage where they were in overshoot, where they did kill off a lot of the large animals, and they probably also faced a bottleneck and problems with sustaining themselves. And I think in some of those cases, that is where the so-called, the sort of native people's wisdom that we see the remnants of now in our time came from that, because they saw that they had made a very bad mistake in the way they were interacting with the natural world in terms of destroying these animals. And it was a wake-up call for them. And this is not my idea. I just don't know where I read it or got it from now. But, you know, that this was at the point where a lot of these early human groups became much more environmentally engaged, aware, sensitive, you know, and sort of saw themselves as custodians of their environment and participants in everything that was going on, rather than just purely using it any way they want to extract their needs from it. And that is that process of uh, learning that wise lesson is something that current civilization hasn't gone through. It's going through it now. Whether it will emerge on the other side of it any wiser, or whether it just won't emerge on the other side of it at all, remains to be seen, I guess. But I mean, it's just going back to what I was saying about the extinction of the megafauna. It was particularly striking in Australia, because there's just nothing here at all. It was completely destroyed by the original sort of settlers here, and so was, you know, vast amounts of forest and all the rest of it. But you know, if you now look at the kind of wisdom of these people, they've got a very wise outlook on the natural environment. But obviously, at one stage in their distant past, they didn't. You know, so they had the opportunity, they had the good fortune, I guess, to have made a mistake and come out on the right side of it. And you know, we're looking at this. Are we going, you know, this state that humanity is in at the moment? Is this an opportunity that anyone's going to recognise, or will it just be lost on the way down the drain hole?
Yeah, about that, because now we're kind of discussing to go into the fourth industrial revolution, also called the Green New Deal. And the way I understood Sophie, we had a chance when we figured out that we killed off all the megafauna before we started agriculture. Should we sort of take a hint and you know, downsize our human enterprise, or just carry on and double down? I think we know the answer now, and we're also going to double down this time in the 2020s, when we know all of these things about our destruction of the natural environment and how we are depleting the climate and stuff. We're still going to charge ahead and build a entirely new industrial fourth generation society, which even mainstream critics are saying it won't be ecological at all. It will just be sort of the emperor's new clothes, or just you know, so some green furnishing in the edges of the same thing. Yeah, so it seems that we are not taking the hint as a human society even now, which I think is pretty depressing.
Yeah, I suppose there's always, as we were saying a couple of weeks ago, that, you know, like doubling down on this and pursuing fourth industrial revolution, or whatever you want to call it, still might actually cause industrial civilization to go down more quickly, just by virtue of its own insane excess. and that could be the best way by accelerating its own stupidity. And so what's our role? Instead of agency, looking at where we do have agency, which is within ourselves, instead of trying. And I think this comes back to Lord Hugh's emphasis on, getting out from the domination of this part of our psychology, the alien cortex, is bring agency back to where you have it, which is within yourself, and work there. Given that the civilization that's supporting us is going to go down probably regardless, and so what is really going to count in the end is each person's. Well, two things are going to count, of course. You obviously want as much of the natural environment to escape as possible, but I think that's just going to be a thing that's just got to occur of its own accord. And then there's within us is how is each individual person going to go down? Are we going to just recognise that this was unfortunate? That it probably couldn't have gone any other way, and yes, to continue to do the right thing just because it's the right thing to do, but also to be in some state of equanimity within oneself. As DB wrote, what did you just say, DB, about Blake back up there? Who died singing and something or other. I can't see it now.
Yeah, he died singing hymns and stuff, is what they say.
Yeah.
Even in the ripeness video, Hugh talked about thinking about what it means to complete your own life and then do that.
Yeah. I think that's where we're at, to attend to that, because that's where we stand a chance of having some agency. Yeah, that's just.
Well, that's where we.
Thought there.
And to add to what you're saying, Gary, that's where we add to this beauty of nature and nature's terrible nature. They say nature maybe is not aspect. It is huge and terrible. It is not. We must stop having this romantic, emotional view of life and saying, "Oh my God, this is so terrible," and we're going down. And it's this acceptance is also in flow. It's the power of Kali, and we're her husband lying down, and she's on top of us. Like we are so much. Our anthropocentric view is so corrupting everything that we're not in flow. We're not in line. If a few of us survive, so much the better, because of what we talked about last week about our place in this whole creation, maybe our role that we don't even know. Destruction that you need to have life, and the amount of death you need to have life. And if you're looking at astrophysics, if you're looking at everything, if you look at the churning of the swell in the ocean to bring up the plankton, and everything is in destruction and reconstruction all the time, and that's what nature is.
Yeah, that reminds me of a conversation I had with like a nihilistic person. Their claim is that the universe is bad, terrible, and unfit to live in and whatever. And I said, well, why are you saying that? You're in your room, comfortable right now, breathing, you have food, everything's fine. Why are you saying the universe is bad? Makes no sense.
I think the focus that Gary mentioned on our inner life and our agency about what to do with our inner constitution and stuff is very interesting and very important. One of the things I have in mind is that to a lot of people, like the wife of the protagonist in The Road by Cormac McCarthy, who chose to just go out, not go out into the street, but go out. I think what ends when in civilized society ends is the concept of the future that we're talking about maybe 20 years ago. The future as a bright and technological and positive thing. So when that story ends for most people, for normies and stuff, it very quickly turns into something that they don't want to be a part of, and so kind of preparing ourselves for a totally new outlook, and also a world where there are no longer any Netflix or any new books coming out every year, and no distractions, no bullshit news on the TV or the computer. But I would say that nature becomes 100% of your daily occupation. Nature and finding water and food and stuff, and that used to give people meaning for 10,000 years at least, or 2 million years, and I think Ted Kaczynski talks about the loss of meaning in our society is because everything is just so easy, and I'm feeling this very, very strongly these days in June. I feel I need to go and catch my own food. It's just an urge that comes back in summer, I think. So we it's not like we're orphans when we go back to nature. It's more like we rediscover meaning, and I don't subscribe to the idea of nature as a big, brutal, godforsaken place, really. It's more like finding out that she has lots of places to sleep, and she has beautiful meadows and little creeks with trout and fish, and it's a beautiful place, really. But it's kind of like when you have these doubling down normies who just want to go on and buy a bigger house and more houses and 2 cars, and going from that perspective or that outlook and into a dark wall of trees without streetlights. Yeah, it's kind of two worlds colliding, right?
Yes,
I think.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say so right about meaning, about the meaning. Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, I'll talk about that in just a second. But just what Torstein was saying is, what we've lost is in not being in nature like that is that we're not. Nature is the thing which produces the sense of awe, which is essentially a space of stillness, and we've really removed ourselves from circumstances in which we would experience awe. It comes down to a second or two of some violent movie on on television instead of sunset, instead of watching a flock of birds or something with a lot more extension in time and space and depth and everything to it. And it's just thinking while Torstein was talking there that it's a great pity that a kind of a paradox, a contradiction, I guess, in a way, that it's been just in really the post-war period that we've entered into this really state of no return that we've created basically with carbon dioxide emissions. But it's also just been in that period of time, post-war period, that we also entered into the period of when most people within Western societies became more or less in one generation disconnected from anything natural. Everything came from the shop, and generally just about everybody stopped having a garden in their backyard and these kind of things. So we entered into this realm of alienation, and we're basically only one generation into it, and it's such a pity that if we didn't have this really one generation that's lived its entire life in this alienated state, we could possibly be having a very different conversation, I think. And it's a shame because it's in terms of time, in terms of history, it's such a short period that just crossed a line, I think. And I just want to go back before Torstein was talking about what Sophie said of Kali dancing there. I think the important thing there is that Kali didn't intend to kill Shiva and didn't kill and didn't intend to kill Shiva. So whilst Kali was formidable as a force of, I think Sophie, you were sort of likening that to the Mother Nature in terms of Kali. So this is a great formidable thing, but it's not necessarily. It doesn't. It might mean death, but it doesn't mean total death and complete annihilation. So I just want to add that little bit about Shiva, and Sophie also mentioned the in that little bracket about the anthropocentric view and George Socrates a sort of questioning about our purpose, and there's one thing that I do think is our purpose, or even if you don't want to use the word purpose because it's probably a bit of a fraught word, use the word what was our accomplishment, or what have we got to show, so to speak. And this is something that Hugh did mention once, I remember. And we did touch on this last week in terms of consciousness, I think, and the consciousness of animals we were talking about. And I think that the one thing that we have accomplished, not as a personal accomplishment, but just as human beings, is the possibility of, is the existence of this self-reflective consciousness. That we know that we're conscious, and this is something that we can think about as a subject in its own right. That we're aware of what we've got, and in the spiritual perspective, we even take that one level further, where we're not just aware that we're aware, but we're aware of the awareness that is aware. Of the added layers of awareness, and I think that is our accomplishment. That has been that is what we demonstrate, that nothing else is demonstrated. And in a way, what that means is that we're more or less we're the eyes and ears of God, that we're the way that God can appreciate creation, because of our added levels of consciousness. And I think that is our thing, that is unique. And yeah, I mean, obviously it's not without its problems, because you can see the mess that we're in. But it's at the one hand, it's got us into problems. I think because not enough people have taken it to the next level of spiritual awakening. Of spiritual awakening is why we have ended up pursuing doggedly this path of self-destruction. It's evidence of the fact that only some of us have really realised the full potential of human beings. Hugh did say there at one stage, what a tragedy it would be if that was lost for eternity. If all of the human beings went extinct, it could take billions of years before anything else arose that could recapture that kind of consciousness. It may never happen again. It could be lost for eternity. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would just like to add to what you said, Gary, about our generation learning so little from our parents' generation. I think it's the worst. It's the worst case of not putting forward our survival skills. Skills for surviving without a plastic bank card in all of human history. And it's amazing that coincides with the one time that we really need all the skills in our toolbox to sustain ourselves after all the shops.
Yeah, I mean, what a pity that we've.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
we've lost it just at the point where we need it.
Yeah. It's a very, very bad timing. And then I would just connect that to something you said after that, Gary, and that was that certainly no animal or plant, mostly animal, no other animal forgot to pass on their skills to their offspring, and that is only us doing that. And I would like to use that as a contrast to what you're saying about us being so positively different, because I think just that fact that we didn't pass on anything about how to survive in the wild over this last generation, that kind of from the other perspective, that kind of nullifies all the positive exceptions that humans can boast about, because no fox or wolf would certainly give birth to a litter of kids without learning them and teaching them anything about how to survive in this thing.